please welcome back to the stage our moderator, Miles O'Brien.
We're coming around the home stretch now. Somebody told me there might be a little bit of football going on this weekend. And so we appreciate those of you who'd rather be doing the weekender, getting an early start, being here. It sounds like just about all of Southern California is going to vacate to Northern California. It might cause some sort of tectonic shift, I guess. It's time for our last commercial break and the awarding of the winner. Our fifth regional winner in the regional winner in the project with the theme Improving Human Well-Being in the Developing World is coming up. The students are all part of the NAE Grand Challenge Scholar Program, which educates students in research, interdisciplinary curriculum, entrepreneurship, global perspective, service, and learning. Now, in an effort to promote this theme throughout the last spring, each regional site of Grand Challenges conducted a little design competition, and they came up with these 5 winners regionally, and we have representatives from each of the team here. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to roll the final commercial, the final pitch, and then we'll bring them all up, and we'll award. I'm going to do my Ryan Seacrest best to build suspense for who the winner is. So without further ado, commercial number 5.
Hey everyone, my name is Rajesh Tanna.
And I'm Kim Parker, and we're here to talk about the Guatemala Water Project. The Guatemala Water Project is an Engineers Without Borders project focused in Socorro, Guatemala. Socorro is a community of 150 families that lack access to clean drinking water. Their current source of water is the Chichoy River, which is heavily contaminated with bacteria, helminths, and viruses. Therefore, they need a sustainable way to purify their water.
Wukukuwak, a non-government organization there, did a study which shows 75% of the children there suffer from diarrheal diseases.
After investigating several options, our group decided that biosand filtration is the most effective way to deal with this problem. This is because biosand filters are cost-effective, easy to use, and very sustainable.
This past winter break, a group of us traveled to Socorro to help implement the filters. 4 local workers there were trained on how the filters work and what they do. In order to make sure this wasn't just a temporary solution, we went around educating the community about how the filters work. We went to schools, houses, and other areas to make sure the community understood the importance and how to maintain these filters. We went to the schools with the hopes and talked to the teachers with the hopes that they'd be able to incorporate that knowledge of this filter in their curriculum. We went to houses explaining them how to use the filter and how to clean them when needed. By doing this, we hope that this would provide the residents of Socorro, Guatemala with a permanent solution and way to get clean drinking water.
Although our implementation in Socorro, Guatemala has been highly successful with seeing large continuous usage of the biosand filters, one problem remains. Although the biosand filters in Socorro will help remove helminths and bacteria from the drinking water of the community, there's one problem in that the biosand filter does not effectively remove viruses. To remedy this, our project is researching methods to improve biosand filter design, such as the addition of iron oxides to the sand media. We hope that by adding positively charged iron in the form of everyday items like steel wool, we can see an increased removal of viruses. In fact, our preliminary results run in full-scale biosand filters indicate that we can exceed EPA limits for virus removal just by adding simple things like steel wool to the upper half of the sand media in the filter. Through our connections with global leaders in biosand filters, such as the Center for Affordable Water and Sanitation Technologies, that's implemented over 300,000 biosand filters around the world, we can affect millions of people through the improvement of their biosand filter design. Our research has experienced widespread success. We partnered with the Center for Affordable Water and Sanitation Technologies, which has implemented 500,000 biosand filters around the world. so that we can spread the results of our research to all of these filters so that they can also remove viruses simply by adding steel wool to the top half of the sand media. We've received recognition from the Environmental Protection Agency, the Water Environment Federation, and the American Society of Civil Engineers for our research. Finally, we've been developing new aspects of our projects, including work on a business plan that has been recognized by Dr. Muhammad Yunus, a Nobel Peace Prize winner known for his work on microloans.
Wanted to do this because of the low cost of the filters. Each filter costs under $35 to make, and it only requires one initial investment. After doing so, a study shows that 85% of filters are still in use 13 years after usage. The filters can produce up to 40 clean liters of water a day.
In addition, once our research results are verified, we can hopefully incorporate the addition of steel wool into these filters that will be distributed using this business plan, and thus create beneficial use for the results of our research near the communities of Socorro.
Well, that's just one aspect. Another aspect is we could set up a small business similar to what we're planning to do in Socorro, and also help people in local areas that are in need of water, like Socorro, get clean water.
The things we have learned from this project can be replicated around the world to ensure a sustainable implementation of biosand filters, as well as a higher quality of drinking water for all users of biosand filters around the world.
All right, let's get representatives of all the teams up here, please. That was obviously from the Chicago Summit, Kimberly Parker and her team from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, the Guatemala Water Project. Joining them, you've seen them previously throughout the summit. From the Raleigh Summit, Amanda Britt from Duke University won for her poster titled The X-Ray Development Timer, a device for improving diagnostic efficiency and accuracy in developing world. From the Phoenix Summit, Ricky Castle from Virginia Tech. Why don't you raise your hand when I say your name there? Ricky Castle from Virginia Tech. Did I say the Phoenix Summit? What were we doing in Phoenix, Virginia? Well, oh, okay. I guess they got airplanes, right? Yeah. Anyway, his poster title, Using Detailed Graphical Models to Advance Personalized Learning. From the Boston Summit, James Switzer and Emmanuel Towns. Raise your hand. Take a bow. All right. Development of bioreactors to harness energy from hydrogen gas producing photosynthetic bacteria. From the Seattle Summit, Christopher Mount, Alex Leon. Raise your hand. There you go. University of Washington, their poster, Modular Healthcare Diagnostics for the Developing World. And first thing I'd like to say, though, is we need to give all of these young people a warm round of applause. You know, earlier in the communications panel, we were talking about engineers making the pitch, making a connection, telling their story. I think you're doing that, so congratulations. Keep that up. Don't be bashful, because you have some great ideas there. Okay, so a little bit about the process here. We didn't do any texting or anything like that. You don't have to say, like, vote for number 5 or anything here. The judges included the USC Viterbi faculty involved in startup companies, representatives from the Grief Center for Entrepreneurial Studies, the USC Institute for Communications Technology Management, and the X Prize Foundation. Now, I'm told it was a difficult decision, and having seen these projects, I can see why, to come up with just one winner from what was an impressive group with a lot of talent and a lot of great ideas. However, based on the original concept of fulfilling a need for developing nations with a limited resource setting, the judges selected, do we have a drum roll? Oh, good, yeah. The judges selected Kimberly Parker and her team from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Come on up, Kimberly. The judges, congratulations, congratulations. Now, the judges will be providing Kimberly comments on how she and her group can take this to the next level, so to speak, and as part of moving the NAE Grand Challenges forward. And 5,000 big ones. There you go. Don't spend it all in one place. You want to say a few words? Say a few words.
Right, so
thank you all for having myself and Anjali Patel here for the conference. We've got about 20 undergraduates and 2 graduate students working on this project, doing research and implementing in Socorro. So there's a big group behind us, and thank you all.
You want to say something?
I think our focus is about implementing sustainability and economic welfare for the 4 Albanese that we're working with to start this business plan. So not only are we doing research, but we're hoping to broaden our project as well to bring the biostem filter all throughout Guatemala. Thank you.
All right, congratulations again. Great job. Great job. And great job to all of you. Give them all a round of applause one more time. They are our future here. Thank you, guys. And there's always next year for the other guys. All right. All right, so, all right, go clear the stage now. We got to move on here. Everybody's got to get on the plane to get up to see the Weekender. So, yesterday we talked a fair amount about Sputnik, you'll recall. If we were alive 53 years ago today, we'd be in a DEFCON 1 tizzy about the beeping basketball-sized sphere in low Earth orbit. Well, Sputnik scared us out of being silly into a very purposeful, coordinated, well-funded march toward undisputed preeminence in the technical field. So I guess you could make the case that fear got us to the moon and helped hasten the digital revolution ultimately. But of course, the digital revolution was not fed by fear alone. The other great motivator came into play, greed. As Gordon Gekko reminds us famously, greed is good. So the question for our business panel is, how many of the grand challenges can be achieved using the magical power of greed or the free market? In short, what portion of the grand challenges fit nicely into a business plan for either a startup or, for that matter, as a new business unit for a Fortune 500 corporation? Or are the ideas so big and so filled with many chicken and egg questions that it requires some sort of government action to get these things started? Certainly many of our global competitors can count on the government to level the playing field for them and subsidize their grand challenges. As Calvin Coolidge once told us, the chief business of the American people is business. Brilliant quote. But can we make these grand challenges business? We'll see. It's my pleasure to introduce the business keynote speaker, the Chief Technical Officer of NuScale Power, Dr. Jose Reyes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be part of a venue that has as its center a vision for grand challenges that could better mankind. More importantly, you've included sessions like this that'll help us lay the groundwork for how we can meet those grand challenges. And so that's why I'm so excited to be part of this. This business panel is aimed at giving you insights basically on how to move your innovation from the lab to the market. That's one of the goals. And so I'm going to start off by sharing a little bit about my personal experience in this arena. As a chairman of the Nuclear Engineering Department at Oregon State University, moving from academia into a startup company was really an education for me. And so what I'm hoping that I'm doing is that I can model basically how faculty can do that. It's been really interesting. It's been a lot of work, and it's been somewhat painful. So I started my career with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I worked 10 years for the regulatory agency, and so my background was the safety culture in terms of that heavy regulatory aspect of design. In 1987, I moved to Corvallis, Oregon, became an assistant professor at Oregon State University, and I got my first grant, $4,000. Do not frown on those little grants. They can become great things. And what I got, this grant was so that I could build a scale model of a nuclear plant and look at natural circulation. It was going to be a transparent model. So I took my $4,000 and I went down the road to a company called Teleline Hua Chang at the time and said, you know, I got $4,000 and I need some glassware to build this transparent loop. He said, well, we can't help you with money, but go to the warehouse and pick out whatever glassware you want. So I got a student, we got a truck, picked up all this glassware and got back. I said, oh, great, now I got $4,000 in glassware. I went to Portland General Electric. I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to build a transparent nuclear power plant so you can see natural circulation, passive system. They said, oh, great. We'll give you $50K a year for 3 years. You can build one of these things. Oh, great, great. Okay, $4,000 glassware, $50,000 from PGE. I present a paper on what I was doing at a conference, and Westinghouse was in the audience. And they said, Jose, can you do something similar for our AP1000 or AP600 rather? I said, it's a brand new design. Yeah, I can do that. I can do that. And 2 years later, and about $5.5 million, we had built our large integral test facility. We had done actual certification work that would allow us to move that design forward. After we did that, we just began to replicate. So we did the AP600, then we built a facility for the Palisades nuclear power plant, then we built a test facility for the AP1000, and then we built a test facility for our NuScale design, and my colleagues are now building a test facility for a high temperature gas reactor. So once you get the model, make it simple, make it robust, and replicate like crazy. That's kind of the secret there. So let me talk a little bit about NuScale power and what our intent is there. I'll talk a little bit about our commercialization effort, what nuclear power looks like today, our technology, and then just kind of sum up. So what we're doing is commercializing a 45 megawatt electric modular scalable light water reactor. Okay, this is a very well-known technology. It's the size and how you package it and the safety associated with this and the reduction of financial risk that makes this extremely attractive. Our base design is a 12-module plant that we're seeking certification for. Simplicity, seismically robust, all these things have been factored into the design from the very beginning. And security, it's a post-9/11 design. So security is part of that. So at Oregon State University, they started this commercialization program, and I can't talk enough about how important that is for faculty. I have a list there of the things that the commercialization program does. They basically, help you with a business model. They set you up with a business mentor. They identify venture capital, strategic investors. They help you. The list goes on and on. But the key thing about that is that those are skill sets that most engineers don't have. And you have to team up with a group like that in order to really make this thing work. And what I'm finding is that there's a mind shift on campuses around the country. The thought is now that, the best validation of my research is if someone uses it. And that's important. The idea that you can do something, we still continue to publish and publish and publish, but wow, to move something from the lab to the market, there's something special about that. So our design was based, essentially we had great success with other folks' design. We had some funding from the Department of Energy to build this NuScale concept. And again, it's just a small modular reactor. We refined the concept, built on that, and then in 2007, myself and Paul Lorenzini, our CEO, we founded this company, NuScale. So Paul's got a great background. He was formerly the president of Pacific Power and Light, CEO for the Hanford operations. He's an attorney and a PhD in nuclear engineering. Yeah, he's a great partner. This has worked out well. So we formed that company, and we had a technology transfer agreement with OSU. In exchange, they got an equity share in the company, which goes to the foundation, basically. In November of 2007, we had our first meetings with the regulators. We had introductory meetings with the Department of Energy, and we filed our first patents. And then we had our first financing in January of 2008. CMEA Ventures, which is out of San Francisco, Maurice Gunderson, was the first really to invest in us. And since then, we've gotten other investors, MK Capital out of Stanford. Well, we continue to grow. We have an integral test facility, which is essentially a 1/3 scale prototype of our design. We're building an actual control room, the simulator, that will allow us to test the ideas and concepts, human factors engineering and things like that. And that picture just shows you kind of the building we're in now. We've grown in a very short time to 85 engineers. And in addition to that, they're supplemented by 80 contractors. And we continue to grow. So by the end of the year, we'll be around 100 engineers and an equivalent number of contractors. But we're working right now on getting this through the design certification process. Documenting design so that the federal government can review it and approve it. So it's more than just ourselves, of course. We have partners. Kiewit Construction is our architect engineer, our EPC. We work closely with them. They do all the design for balance of plant. They're a very high-tech, or very sophisticated civil construction engineering. And then all of our vendors. We decided early on that we wouldn't be vertically integrated, that we were going to rely on other companies to build modules, vessels, things that they were very much expert in, instead of us trying to buy that technology or create that strength within the company. So it's sort of like a Boeing model. We're looking for others to build the pieces parts, and then we assemble it as modules. What that does for us is it gives a very robust supply chain. It really reduces costs because we can get all of our forgings, for example, in the United States. 4 or 5 different forge outfits can build our forgings. We don't have to go overseas to get them. And that reduces costs because they're competing with each other on the bids. So where are we today with nuclear? With nuclear, in terms of the power itself, we've seen attitudes shifting. And you can see on this graph, the green line goes up, and it's widening. So more and more folks, this is a graph which shows attitudes towards building nuclear power plants as part of our energy mix in the future. We see it's really shifted quite a bit. So we're close to about 70% now of the U.S. in favor of building more nuclear. And that's driven by the market, of course. And on the right-hand side there, you see the carbon emission factors. You see coal is the largest. Natural gas is less, but still pretty large. And it tends to get a very good, it tends to draft behind coal, but it is a carbon producer. And then you can see the rest of the renewables and nuclear, which are very low. So that's part of what's driving the interest in nuclear right now. Excuse me, I'm going to have to get a drink of water. We are moving to standardized designs, which means that instead of every plant being different, each plant now is the same in terms of our model. That's refreshing. I can advertise with it. So the new nuclear, lots of the technology has changed in the past 30 years. Many people think that nuclear is the same as it was 30 years ago. Well, it's changed a lot. Just think about the computer being developed. And that's changed, that's impacted safety, it's impacted training, it's really made a big difference. So nuclear plants now have, in terms of licensing, go to a standardized design. They go to combined construction operating license. Capacity factors jumped from 70% back in the 70s to like 90% now. So they're available. They've become one of the most reliable sources of power on the grid. We're going to passive safety systems, so these use natural circulation, basically the work that we've done. And the one thing that hasn't changed is that all the new plants that have been certified to date are large, 1,000-megawatt plants. And so this is a chart that was put together by J.P. Morgan that we've added our lines to. But you can see the challenge for large nuclear right now is just that they're capital intensive. So as a result, you look at the Southern, Exelon, Dominion, Duke Power, you look at their equity value and look at their enterprise value. And if they're being asked to build $11 billion to $17 billion plant, well, it's a big investment. And so that becomes a barrier to getting the plants built. So what's our grand idea? What was my vision in the middle of the night kind of thing? Basically, this is it. So a single module. This is a little cartoon here. It's a reactor vessel, which sits inside of a steel, essentially a thermos bottle. So it's a vacuum thermos bottle in a pool of water underground. That's it. Okay, reactor inside of a steel thermos bottle, underwater, underground. It's all natural circulation driven, so the little red box on the side there is the fuel. We're using conventional, standard, readily available fuel that produces heat. That heat rises. It goes around the riser, very clever name, riser. It goes around the riser, and on the outside of the riser, we've wrapped a helical coil steam generator, which is removing the heat. And so cold, denser water goes down, hot water rises, and you just get this natural circulation behavior. There's no pumps required for this. So it's very, very simple. Because it's smaller diameter, the wall thicknesses are simpler. This is a much, much simpler design altogether. Standard, in terms of the turbine generator set, skid mounted, so you can deliver them on a skid, and you install them. So it's a very simple concept. This is what it looks like in terms of the SolidWorks. This shows the actual module. We put them on trunnions. So you can imagine if you're concerned about seismic activity, you hang these on trunnions, seismic isolators, and it's underwater, and so these are extremely robust to seismic events. Really remarkably robust. So we're looking at a much wider market. Each module has its own turbine generator set. And we gang, basically, in the center of the center building, we put 12 of these modules together in a pool. And what that does for us then is it gives us a whole new operation model. So it's not just the size of the plant, which is very low profile, it's also how you operate the plant. We've eliminated what we call single shaft risk. That's the idea that you have a $25 part break on a large turbine generator and you shut down the whole plant. You lose 1,000 megawatts. On this, if a turbine fails, the rest of the plant continues to operate. So you only lose 45 megawatts off the grid. In terms of how we refuel these one module at a time. And so that allows us to be refueling continually as opposed to shutting, again, the entire plant for a month or so and bringing on 1,200 contractors to do the maintenance and refueling. So it's a much simpler model. This is what it looks like. This will be half of the building. You see the modules in the pool. We can build it in 2 phases also. So you can incrementally build out. So you can build 270 megawatts first and then add another 270 megawatts. So it's modular within modules. And then this is what, it doesn't look much like a power plant. You don't see the big containment domes. You don't see the big cooling towers. What you see is a much lower profile type of a building. So when you start, we've done several cost estimates. Kiewit has done at least 4 independent cost estimates at this point, 2 early on and then 2 independent later on. And then we took that cost estimate and we sent it over to an independent reviewer who does the financial consulting for utilities. And they validated this very low cost for us in terms of dollars per kilowatt of installed capacity. So we're somewhere around $4,000 per kilowatt of installed capacity. What we found was that it wasn't any one particular thing, but it was all these things put together. The fact that we went to design simplicity, that we went to a much simpler design, the fact that we went to a factory fabrication. All the modules are built off-site in a factory, and all the civil construction is done on-site. And so now you can basically cut your construction time in half. So we have a 3-year construction time. So now the money that you borrow for that is much less. The interest that you have to pay for over that time is much less also. So again, reduced financial risk. The fact that we do the construction, as I mentioned, in parallel is really important. It's not just the modules, but also the turbines and everything else that's skid mounted. How we operate, going to innovative operations is a big help. And the result is a much, much lower cost. So I think part of the messages that I want to share with you is one is that innovation takes a lot of different forms. It could be in the form of just looking at what you have, looking what's available right now, and adapting it to what the need is to make it, to reduce the barriers to financial risk. And this last picture just shows you kind of graphically the fact that we don't build our containments on site. And so you can look at the construction going on there, and what we're doing is we're building the modules in the factory and moving it in. And so it makes it much, much simpler in terms of construction. Much smaller construction crew, a much smaller construction time. So this is the kind of innovation that we're moving to from the laboratory to the market. And I'm so glad to get to share this with you because I get really excited. And I know we'll have some time for questions later. But thank you very much. So let me introduce our panelist, Peter Williams. Peter is the Chief Technical Officer of IBM-Big Green Initiative. Alexis Livanos is the Corporate Vice President, Chief Technical Officer of Northrop Grumman. Isaac Babbs is the Vice President and General Manager of Qualcomm Services Lab. And Pedro Pizarro is the Executive Vice President of Power Operations at Southern California Edison. And so we'll ask you to grab your seats. And Peter will be our first speaker.
Good afternoon. So I was listening to the I don't get no respect routine for engineers before lunch with great interest because I have a politics PhD. When I was at university, this was inside the politics department, so it must have been a politics student that put it there. In the gents' bathroom, right up beside the toilet roll holder, there was a sign saying, politics degrees, please take one. So you guys think you got problems. But joking aside, what I'm going to do is just try to think through, really, from IBM's perspective. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for IBM's Environmental Incubator. And I just want to think through, from IBM's perspective, the implications of some of the grand challenges and the implications of kind of the grand challenge movement in particular. So IBM, for those that haven't seen it, and if you haven't, you must have been walking around with your eyes shut for the last 3 years, is we're heavily into this initiative that we call the Smarter Planet and Smarter Cities. The idea being that, if you like, the mesh is getting smaller. There are more sensors out there. There are more meters out there. They're reporting more and more frequently. There are more analytic possibilities than ever before, and processing power is getting cheaper and cheaper. And therefore, your ability to understand more about the planet, understand more about human systems, and understand more about the interactions between those is getting greater and greater and greater. And that's the central thrust behind Smarter Planet. We spend about $7 billion a year on research on our own account. We employ about 3,500 scientists. A great number of those are mathematicians. At least 170 of them are mathematicians. We use them to develop analytic models for running things like water networks or energy networks or transportation pricing models or whatever it might be. So the kind of themes that we were hearing this morning is something I very much get. And certainly when you look at the 14 grand challenges, to my very quick count, at least 10 of them correspond to areas where IBM is active already. Making solar economical, well, we're a semiconductor manufacturer. Solar photovoltaic is a semiconducting technology. We've been heavily engaged in applying a number of things around copper, indium, gallium selenide technologies, around vapor and solution deposition manufacturing technologies, and around heat conductance to making solar more efficient, making it cheaper to manufacture. Managing the nitrogen cycle. We are heavily involved in the kind of analytic work required for precision agriculture, helping in this case, the large industrial farms in the Central Valley of California reduce their nitrate usage, reduce their water usage, reduce their runoff, and obviously reduce costs at the same time. Carbon sequestration. We were heavily involved actually in some of the geological modelling behind the Sleipner field in the North Sea, which has become the archetype for a lot of the kind of carbon sequestration stuff that people are talking about today. Access to clean water. My primary responsibility really is for IBM's water management activities. So we're heavily engaged in the management of water resources, the management of water infrastructures. That takes me to urban infrastructures. So being able to manage the flow and supply of water underneath city streets, being able to manage the flow and supply of energy within a city, being able to manage the operation of the traffic system within a city, being able to handle things like emergency management, emergency response, weather sensitivity, and all kinds of things like that. That's part of my day-to-day job. Health informatics. We've been heavily involved in things like the portable health record and applying information technology to the improvement of healthcare and the removal of costs and some of the sort of friction, the information friction that exists within the health sector. Reverse engineering the brain. We have an initiative in our Zurich Research Lab to try to simulate brains of increasing sizes. So far I think we're up to a mouse brain, and we can actually produce a working, equivalently powered model of a mouse brain, but we're going to need a bigger computer to be able to advance beyond that, and that's the thing that we're looking at next. Securing cyberspace. As you might imagine, we're a computer company. Security is the kind of stuff we do. We have a number of very interesting initiatives in that area, and so it goes on. So you might think, if you're looking at that, thinking about that list, so there we go. The relevance of the grand challenges is already proved, right? No, actually, it's not. Not from a commercial point of view. Not exactly, anyway. I started, I think, to become more cautious when I thought about the audience that's here today and yesterday, which consists basically of people from some fairly elite universities, some people from some very large and deep-pocketed companies that are in some ways not typical of the norm in America, and some people who are associated with startups beginning to get their heads around what's here and so on and so forth. That leaves a vast kind of phalanx of medium-sized companies that are going to need to be interested in the grand challenges and going to need to understand what is in the grand challenges for them before they start to get engaged. And the grand challenges need those companies to get engaged before you get real traction in the economy of the country as a whole. And at this point in time, I don't want to sound unduly rude, but it seems to me that the Grand Challenge Initiative is a bit of a donut. It's got that big hole right in the middle, and I think that's something that actually needs attention. I have some thoughts as to how it needs filling. So, reflecting obviously that some of the grand challenges are very long term, and some of them are much closer to hand. reflecting also that some of the grand challenges really, you've got to inject new technologies into an entire sector, for example, the infrastructure renewal, the water management, and so on. And some of them you're probably working with a more restricted number of clients, so the fusion grand challenge and some of the cybersecurity ones. So there's big differences there. But I would urge you to start to think about each one of those grand challenges as a business rather than a scientific proposition, however far out it is. So who are the channel for this thing? Who's going to buy this thing? What do they actually want from it? How are they actually going to make money from it? How is it going to be marketed? Who's your channel to actually get this thing out there so that somebody in some small engineering company in Topeka in Kansas or wherever can go, you know what, I can see an opportunity to make money from that. That's the gap, the chasm, if you will, that's got to be crossed at this point. Some things that might help. Roadmaps. So for each of the grand challenges, what is going to be produced, when, by whom, what form will it take, what's its applicability, why is it important, and so on. Open sourcing. So think about the Linux model of the computer operating system, Linux, where the core code for that is in the public domain, but there is a very thriving ecosystem of specialist providers that have grown up around that. IBM is one of them, providing services related to Linux. As I say, fundamentally the product is in the public domain, but the ancillary services around that are proprietary, they're money-making, and they're the kind of economy that I suspect you're going to want to encourage around each one of the grand challenges in their own right. Understand the technology adoption process within several grand challenge areas, for example, water management, for example, health records, for example, the nitrogen cycle. There are technologies out there that would make a huge difference that aren't being used today. They're not being used today for a number of different reasons, and I won't go into them specifically now, but they're sort of related to things like cultural resistance, the price, being able to justify the cost of the things or whatever. But understand what those reasons are, understand why they're not being used before you spin all the extra cycles to innovate further, because you might just be producing new innovations that also won't be used because of the structural conditions in that industry. So you need to understand that. I think there are some significant cross-cutting issues that cut across several grand challenges. So, for example, the smart grid, which combines aspects of making solar affordable, the urban infrastructure, cybersecurity, and even enhanced virtual reality from the point of view of simulation. Another one would be food wastage. 35 to 40% of all of the food produced in the world is wasted. That goes to things like the nitrogen cycle, water management, and so on. Another one, the whole notion of cities as systems of systems, which goes to, again, the nitrogen cycle, water, urban infrastructure, health, enhanced virtual reality, again, from the point of view of simulating how the city is actually going to work as you redevelop it. Think about those issues, because they're getting attention right now in a way that maybe the grand challenge itself is not. So demonstrate, identify what those issues are, understand the relevance of each of the grand challenges to those issues, and make your case accordingly. Return on investment. There was a speaker yesterday that spoke very persuasively indeed about the need to cost out some of the externalities. Well, to the extent that you can do that, you're actually making a case for investment in that area, which means you're going to attract business to that area, which means that the relevance to business has just increased dramatically. So price out those externalities. Think about the legislative changes that might be needed to make sure that those externalities are taken into account as policies are made, resources are allocated, and so forth. So I would almost elevate that to the level of the 15th Grand Challenge. I know we have several candidates for the 15th Grand Challenge right now, but the ability to demonstrate the return on investment in all its dimensions, I think, is highly important. I'm right out of time, which means I timed it rather well. That was as much as I had to say, so thank you very much indeed.
Good afternoon. Today I'm going to spend my 10 minutes talking about the new concept in cybersecurity. And it's a new approach that we have taken that I would like to discuss with you briefly. The cybersecurity topic is a very timely one. And as we all know, every nation, society, and civilization safeguards its citizens and interests in a manner that is consistent with our values and our strengths. Our methods of doing so reflect the value we place on human life, the lives of our troops, our citizens, as well as the lives of our adversaries. Therefore, our defenses in the cyber domain or in the war are dependent a lot on technology, which allows us to respond more effectively and also sometimes more remotely. But it has an Achilles heel. Its dependence on computing and its associated vulnerability to computer attacks. And believe me, our national security does depend on it. The good news is that our tradition of individual initiative, innovation, and free thinking has solved many a national security problem in the past, and I believe it's going to solve this one too. So let's start our discussion by giving you an example of someone who personified those characteristically American traits. His name was John Boyd. And John Boyd was a maverick. He was a instructor in the Air Force, and he was called the 42nd, as you can see, Boyd, because what he used to do in instruction, he used to, in the classroom, position his plane in a very disadvantageous position, and then within seconds reverse the role with his students, and he'd be the one on top. So it was an interesting, he was an interesting man who was able to take what I would call the military theoretical position, and he pioneered his problem-solving techniques. And these are applicable today in what I would explain later on in the OODA loop, which combines traditional thinking as well as control theory and the decomposition of the problem, which I think has a great application in terms of the cyber world. As a matter of fact, the Iraq War, he was attributed towards some of his techniques in terms of the OODA loop were actually applied and resulted in a very quick, a very rapid response and a very quick control over the adversary. So what is this OODA loop? And this looks like a kind of a complicated diagram. It has 4 parts to it. It's really a control loop. Those of you in the control theory can understand all the feedback loops that we have. OODA is observe, orient, decide, and act. The observation is the observation that you do by listening, by radar, by HDTV, whatever have you. The orientation is the very important part. The orientation is, given the observations that you have, how do you orient yourself, how you process, how you determine what is the right thing that you do, how you determine the relevant information, how close is it to truth. Then comes the decision. The decision is, what are you then going to do? And then finally comes the action, which is do it. The loop feeds back, and you restart it, and you can do that in human terms, in terms of minutes or seconds, and in terms of cyber terms, you can do it in milliseconds or nanoseconds. So that is basically the OODA loop, and that was his innovation, and it's a different way of phrasing a control law. The OODA loop was applied by Boyd first in terms of mechanical systems and hardware, but this is not when it's restricted. When nowadays we're talking, instead of the normal Pearl Harbor, we're talking about digital Pearl Harbor. When we're talking about the keystroke that you can just go through Beijing and come back in milliseconds, as opposed to a human loop that you actually have to decide, one may question, well, how is that OODA loop applicable in terms of cyber technology? What is the relevance, since now we're going from hardware away and we're going more into information? And I want to talk a little bit about the vulnerability that we have on information by starting with the next slide in here. And this is the slide. This is our moderator here, which we went in very quickly and looked at his profile. So we're just trying to start getting here. He's the Chief Technical Officer of NuScale Power and so on and so forth, so I'm able to do that. And then what I decided what we're going to do is, and I'm now a bad guy, is tomorrow I'm going to send him an email. It was a pleasure to meet you last week at USC. I sincerely hope you'll be able to attend our next event with details at www.malware.com. And, you know, it really works. I got a summons in the mail about 2 years ago, and I just summons, you know, you always get nervous. So I clicked it. Guess what? Malware. And this is not the only case here, but if you look at the workplace, about a year ago, the Department of Justice got the notification. Selected people in the DOJ get subpoenaed. Malware. They get fooled also. Home. When you work at your home computer, you Google people. You can get IDs, identities of people. I Google people that I'm going to meet when I go to meetings. I even look at and read what they did the thesis on. It's very effective. You get a lot of information this way. And it's kind of interesting because the amount of information that exists in the internet is phenomenal. I lost my BlackBerry, I'm running out of time, in Washington, D.C. And when they came to talk to me about what happened to my BlackBerry, the investigator said, well, how was the christening last Sunday? I said, what are you talking about? He said, you went to a christening, St. Sophia Cathedral, right up there at 10 o'clock in the morning. I was stunned. He just Googled me. And he could tell where I was and what I was doing. So the amount of information that you get is phenomenal. And the part that is also very scary is that there is no attribution because you can hide behind your finger. It's very easy to make things happen. So let me show you here some examples of what can be done in cyber.
We staan hier in de file, uiteraard. Ik had niet anders verwacht. Maar de laatste keer met de NS vermijd ik liever de trein. Ik heb hier een live verbinding met de verkeerscentrale van de ANWB. Dat gaat via een open channel. En daarmee kan ik dus de verkeersborden beïnvloeden. Hier, ze staan nu op 50. Maar we rijden nooit 50, dus ik maak er 5 van. Daar zijn de meesten niet blij mee. Dus ze toch een beetje blij te maken. Smiley. Als ze daar niet vrolijk voor worden. We zijn hier uit de auto gestapt. We staan nu langs de snelweg. Jullie hebben de matrixborden gezien. Maar hier kan ik wat meer tekst op kwijt. Ja, daar komt het. Ik denk dat ik toch wel een schouderklopje verdiend heb. Gaan we even als volgt doen. Het leukste is als mijn foto op zo'n bord terechtkomt. Dat ben ik. Staat hij er? Staat hij er?
This is another little clip.
Op Utrecht Centraal. Ik heb hier een mobieltje bij met een supersnelle internetverbinding. Dan ga ik straks proberen verbinding te krijgen met het netwerk van ProRail. Zie je het hele mooie grote scherm daar? Ik wil straks een livestream verbinding maken. Waardoor ik live beelden kan overbrengen op het grote scherm. Hij maakt verbinding. Hij doet het. Dames en heren. Hallo, daar ben ik. De trein naar Alicante zou vandaag niet vertrekken. Ik herhaal, de trein naar Alicante zou vandaag niet vertrekken. Ik vind het leuk. Man met de rode jas, U heeft een auto gewonnen. Ja. U heeft een auto gewonnen. Ja. Applausje, klopt niet waar. Hoe doe je dat, joh? Veilig.
So this is the fun side for hacking, if you can call it fun. This is a much more serious situation here, where actually malware was implicated. The investigation is not over. There are other contributing factors, but that's pretty scary when you're looking to try to find a database and you can't do it, and you cannot do it effectively. It can have very serious implications in terms of not just national security, but in terms of lives. So it is a very real problem that I think we need to address. And what I mentioned earlier is I mentioned earlier about taking the OODA loop, the observation, orientation, decision, and action, and applying it in this particular case. And I think that's a very important concept, because after the observation, where you actually see the different signatures that are coming in, you look at the different patterns that are coming in, you're looking at traffic going in and out, marketing traffic going out at 2 o'clock in the morning, that doesn't make any sense. You can immediately detect that there is a threat. So you identify who is the potential person that is threatening you, you interpret the data, you match it with known signatures, you match it with patterns, you do an aims derivation, what am I going to do, what effect is going to have, what I predict the next loop is going to do, and then you generate the options and you act on them. You close the loop, and then you come back and you do that dynamically in order of milliseconds. And that's the kind of thing that we're proposing as a cyber defense alternative, which is to have a very active loop, a very active system that actually can feedback almost in real time and correct itself. So if there is a virus, if it's a rootkit, or if there is any kind of malware, the system will adapt itself to address it in a very short period of time, avoiding collateral damage. And then finally, what I want to show as the last chart is how you would take this and apply it in the future. And this is what places like USC have a tremendous amount to contribute, and that is on the critical part of the loop that has to do with the orientation. And the orientation in the future is going to be a lot more complicated than it is right now. We are talking about flexible systems and flexible architectures. We're talking about systems that are flexible because they evolve as the threat evolves. Or we're talking about architectures that are flexible because they mutate. They become a different architecture. So your opponent cannot really determine where exactly you're at. You're talking about an absolutely massive virtualization, that you have a lot of virtual machines, hundreds or thousands of virtual machines running on one physical machine. And then you're talking about the agile hypervisors, where you want to monitor all those processes for all those machines, and then their ramifications thereof. So there is a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done in that area. I think a lot of people are working on it. We're very excited about it. But that's kind of what I see the future in terms of the cybersecurity, a very active feedback control system, very rapid, with flexible architectures that has the ability to respond to an evolving threat. So, thank you.
Good afternoon. How are you guys doing today? Good. My name is Babbs. I'm with Qualcomm. I run a internal startup creation group inside of Qualcomm, and it's really fascinating how a bigger company tries to recreate itself or try to create new businesses from within. I'm going to talk a little about that, but I think the topic that we really want to stay on is really on the grand challenges. We're going to talk about how mobile could be applied to a lot of these challenges you guys have been thinking about and talking about. We're specifically going to talk about 4. There's really been a big shift going on in mobile. I think everybody reads about it every day, but if you look at kind of the history, there was really the mainframes and the mini computers were the first wave of computing to hit. And then PCs came on, and then the web was the third wave. If you really look at what's going on now, mobile is really the 4th wave, and it's by far going to be the biggest and the most impactful of anybody's lives around the world, bar none. And it's very, very exciting because it's happening right now, today. A lot of you students that are in school, it's just amazing. It is really the future. Like who knows how many mobile subscribers we have in the world today on phones? Right there, the man's right on there. 5.2 billion out of approximately 7 billion people. There's never been a platform like this at any time in mankind. I doubt if there ever will again. So it's just amazing. So, you know, in regards to the grand challenge on wireless and mobile, it really is very, very transformative. And the areas that we're using mobile to address are really smart grids, education, healthcare, augmented reality. A little different from virtual reality, and I'll talk about that. But those are projects that we've got going on today that are happening in the United States and around the world. So I want to get into those in just a sec. Before I do that, I want to step back and talk about Qualcomm and innovation and what's happened with, what kind of Qualcomm, if you look back when we started 25 years ago, we took on the grand challenge of creating another standard to do wireless communications called CDMA. And it was a monumental task when we did it, but it paid off. So when you take on these challenges, they, and you really stay on it, they will pay off. We did it as a private company. Some of the things I know you've been talking about are combinations of academia, public, and then corporations. We have our own methodology, which worked really well here. We're very, very strong in corporate R&D. We're thinking up ideas. We take them into the wireless ecosystem, either enabling partners or partnering with companies, which really get to the subscribers, which are you, and then the money ideally comes back. We spend a ton of money on this. We here in Southern California, we've got at least 10,000 employees. We're spending about $2.3 billion a year on corporate R&D. And a lot of the people we do hire, once again for the students in the crowd, we hire lots of STEM students, lots of engineers, lots of software engineers coming out. The thing that we're spending most of that money on, quite frankly, is in continuing to prove the networks. Everybody knows we've gone to 3G. Everybody knows we're going to 4G. And that's happening around the world. I mean, Verizon just announced yesterday that they're deploying 4G across most of the major metropolitan areas. You've Sprint's out there. So this is going to continue to happen, and we're a leader on that. And what that really means to you, and what that means to countries around the world, it's really wireless broadband. At speeds you're getting at or more what you're getting on your wire lines. And we're continuing to invest in that and having it happen. And when that happens, that bandwidth, it changes a lot of the societies, it changes the way people communicate and the way people interact. I mean, even like who has an iPad here? How many people have iPads? I mean, it's a different experience when you use that than what you're doing with your PC. And it's pretty amazing how it's changing the way people interact with data, too. And when we're taking these ideas, we go from ideation to core to proof of concepts, and we spend a lot of time also with government agencies because of the way spectrum's handled around the world too, and making sure that we could deploy these things. Like an example for us is one of the next technologies which we think will win is called LTE, long-term evolution. To make sure that we understand it and have it happen around the world, we actually bought $1 billion of spectrum in India, and we'll work with a partner to continue to deploy that. When you look at these grand challenges, remember I said Qualcomm was really started on a grand challenge. This is the impact something like this will have when it's successful. You look at kind of in San Diego County, south of us about 2 hours, is that Qualcomm has that kind of impact in 2007, and then compared to the US Open, which happened that year in the Super Bowl, that was the year the Super Bowl was going on there too, and versus the convention center. So it's really worth us continuing to push on this. Most of you do know us, but employ 16,000 people. Really, two areas that we're really known for is really owning and having the intellectual property around 3G, which will go to 4G, and then making a lot of the chips. We're in about 400 million cell phones a year. We're in around the world. Who thinks leads in wireless by a nation? Who's the leading nation by wireless, you think? Or would you think that Europe is ahead of us, or is the United States ahead of us? Europe. So most people think that. There's actually a study that came out, and that's absolutely wrong. I mean, the United States way ahead of Europe, but there was a study that came out showing that we're really only behind Korea now in 3G deployments. Up on par with Japan. Japan is a little ahead on the 3G, but maybe we're right there even with us. The rest of the world, we're way, way ahead. A lot of us Americans, we think we're behind. We are ahead. You look at what's happening with Google, with Apple. If you consider RIM as part of North America or part of America, which I'm not any Canadians in the crowd. I'm not trying to say you are. All the innovation is really coming from here. And it's really changing what's going on around the world. I mean, the feature phones you have are going to be smartphones. There's not going to really be feature phones. Everything is going to be a little computer in your pocket. So I think I just talked about that, how that's changing the computing side. You know, the processors here now, you've seen the droids, and there's, a lot of the stuff that our latest stuff shipping is 1.2, 1.5 megahertz processors are coming. It just changes what happens. I'm going to talk about how this influences things. Devices, I talked about iPads, I talked about all these smartphones coming. It's just unbelievable. And a lot of people, the way you're going to interact with it is going to be completely different than sitting at a desk. I mean, there's, and let me talk specifically on some things here. So one is the way to healthcare. In my group, I've got a project going. It's called Net2. You'll see it next year. But in general, we're going to be able to sense anything going on in your body. We're going to be able to capture the information, send it up through the cloud, and then you're going to have access to it. And pretty much anything you could think of, you're going to be able to do that. Now, this is some consumer examples here, but think of for diabetes, diabetic people. Think for heart monitors, it's already going on. CardioNet's a company that we've been actively involved with in San Diego, where it wears a cardiac monitor on you and it actually uploads that wirelessly to the doctor could see it. This has just become standard norm, particularly as hospitals have less and less beds, as the cost of it, as the insurance cost, they're going to push that to outpatients, and wireless is going to drive a lot of this. Another example in this is education. This is an example actually going on in Washington, D.C. We have a whole group called Wireless Reach. The study was done. We gave smartphones to, I think it was about 50 to 100 students, and let them use it kind of more in a free-form fashion, but their test scores went up significantly. I think it was like a 20% increase just having the technology, using it day to day, not just in the classroom, but taking it home with them. The thing I like, though, best about education and kind of the grand challenge, particularly you young entrepreneurs out there, is there's not a lot of new things going on mobile as there should be around education. There's a company called Blackboard, which is probably most likely installed at USC, mostly academia. I'm most concerned, actually, quite frankly, about the K through 12 area. But it is the most ubiquitous device that any teenager is going to have in their pocket today. And we need to start taking advantage of it. It's a little like remember when some of you guys my age or older, remember when you used to bring a calculator to the class? It was not allowed. It's still like that in the phone. But quite frankly, if I have a TI calculator or my phone, what's the difference? Because the TI calculator software is going to run on that phone. So why aren't we taking advantage of it? So that's an area that we want to see continue to go. I mean, more so in the developing and emerging countries, wireless and mobile is changing the way they live, the way they communicate, their economic resources. Here was an example of fishermen being able to capture their fish, and then where do they go sell it? It used to be they would catch it and take it to the home port, and if there was a market or a buyer, great. Now they're able to select different ports and actually sell their fish before they get to that port. And in small villages, a lot of women are time-sharing a phone. It's really made the difference for women around the world and will continue so. Banking in Kenya, a lot of the banking is done. I think it's 50% of the banking is actually done with phone credits. It's become a form of currency. So it's not just here these grand challenges will make a difference. And the last area I want to talk about that's we're very active is, it's different from virtual reality. It's actually augmenting your reality. So this device that you carry with you all the time, you're going to be able to augment everything around you. And that's a little different from virtual, because I'm not trying to create a different world. I'm trying to just augment the world I'm in today. So some examples of that are, I'm looking at my Cheerios box. I'm actually able to identify, sorry, I don't have a way to go back on this, but I was able to identify that character. The character starts interacting with me with 3D, but it could be the same way as I walk in, and I might even see my friend, and I might even be able to even have augment around my friend. That's a little out there, I know. But other examples are marketing and then gaming. We announced this last week. It is available. If any of you, like I said, the students, particularly computer science students or engineering students that want to download the SDK, it's available on the Qualcomm website. This is happening right now. We're going to be augmenting a lot of the information that's going on some of the leading search sites out there, i.e. Google, i.e. Bing. You're going to be able to figure out what an image is, and you're going to be able to augment that. It could be information, it could be characters, it could be I'm leaving something behind to communicate with somebody else. So there's a lot of this is going on. So that just gives you kind of here's another example, application for gaming. But that gives you an idea kind of for what we're looking at with mobile, and we're really excited about it. And we are a Southern California company. I don't know if the people that are sitting in this auditorium, the engineering school is named after one of our founders. He was nice enough, I believe, to make a generous donation. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm Pedro Pizarro at Southern California Edison, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. It's a great panel, so it's fun to be here. I want to talk about the grand challenges in terms of sustainability, and so focusing on that and what we in the electric industry are doing about that, not just inside the electric system, but think about it this way. The electric grid and the electric industry is maybe, what, a couple percentage points out of the total economy, but it helps power the rest of the economy. And so we recognize that we have a special role in achieving a lot of the goals out there, particularly around sustainability and being better to the environment. So I'm going to focus on a number of thoughts at the national level and then give you some examples of what we're doing at SCE. This is just, for those of you who are in town probably know us. Some of you may be our customers. I hope we're keeping your lights on. That's what we are here to do. But we serve about 5 million meters, almost 14 million customers, and a huge capital program right now. We're spending about $20 billion over the next 5 years, and most of that is on the grid. We are the nation's leader in the use of renewable resources. We're the nation's leader in energy efficiency, and those are important in terms of sustainability. So I'll talk about that in a sec here. Let me start though with a national picture that has global application. And as I think about sustainability and being good to the environment, it is about a number of things. It can be about air quality, it can be about water use, it can be about fuel use. But one area that clearly has captured all of our attention across the country and the world is the issue of climate change and greenhouse gas reductions. So I'll try to give you here is a little picture that a group called EPRI that we participate in, the Electric Power Research Institute. They've done a couple of versions of this over the last few years. If you look at the top line represents the greenhouse gas emissions from the U.S. electric sector under a business as usual case. So if we just keep on doing what we're doing right now, this will be our emissions, about 2,700 million tons of CO2 equivalent in the year 2030. The bottom line represents what the emissions would have to reduce to in order to have the contribution needed by the electric sector under a framework like, for example, the Waxman-Markey bill that the House and Senate were working on. We don't have legislation yet at a federal level, but it kind of gives you one data point on how steep the reductions may need to be across the United States. There's a big gap between the 2,700 million business as usual, 2,700 business as usual, and the around 1,000 million metric tons a year of CO2 equivalents by 2030. And what EPRI did was take a look at a number of technologies across the electric sector and figure out how to fill that gap. Where would the reductions come from? And I'm sorry, it may be a little hard to read, but you have everything from efficiency on the customer side to efficiency in the grid, use of renewables, new nuclear, more efficient power plants, electric transportation, and also electrifying other technologies. I won't go into the details, but let me tell you that any one of the assumptions for any one of these single technologies, pretty hard to reach. It'd be a tough job. Getting all of those together is a really tough job. That's a grand challenge, right? And so to those of you, particularly in the engineering community, this is part of the prize that we're all going after, because we need to figure out how to get that level of reductions across our industry. And I'm happy to say we're working with a number of you across the academic community on problems like this. Let me touch on a few of the areas. Renewables. Like I said, we have the nation's largest portfolio of renewable energy. We do most of that through contracts. We were about 17% renewables last year, going to almost 20% this year to meet state law. This state may end up with a 33% law at some point. Doesn't look like it will happen in this session, but we do have an executive order around that. There is a challenge in getting that much renewable generation built and paid for. And it's not just, though, about the renewable generators. It's not just about solar or wind and the land use issues and the financing issues, but it's also about the infrastructure to enable that and to enable the integration. Building transmission. We're spending over $3 billion in the next 5 years just on transmission that's targeting renewables. And by the way, it's hard to build that because it takes us about 10 years to go through the process from a white sheet of paper to a line delivering electrons. Only about 2 years of that is actual construction. But 8 years of that is the whole permitting and licensing process. And Jose, I'm sure empathizes when he thinks about what he is going through in terms of his innovative nuclear technologies, similar kind of issues. So one other piece here is that we need, with the intermittency of renewables, to back that up with, today it's largely through gas-fired sources. In the future, hopefully storage will play a greater role, but also getting those sited, licensed, financed is part of the challenge. Energy efficiency, another area where we're proud of what we've done here. We have saved almost 7 billion kilowatt hours with our programs over the last 5 years. We're putting in another $1.2 billion over the next 3 years to save another 5 billion kilowatt hours. Together, those will amount to the equivalent of taking more than 1 million cars off the road. This is really important. California has a leadership role here. I think you're now seeing more and more states adopting some of the tools that California has. Our smart meter deployment is a part of that because that will also help to enable energy efficiency reductions as well as demand reductions. But we also see the smart meters, which, by the way, again, I mentioned our 5 million meters. We're now past the 1.5 million meter mark in terms of deployment. We'll have changed out our entire meter base by 2012. That's important not just for efficiency, but it's also part of enabling the smart grid, because at the retail level, that will become one of the hubs leading back into our system in partnership with the whole ecosystem of vendors, IBM and a number of others who are out there who will be adding functionality to the grid, and we look forward to those partnerships. Now, again, going beyond the smart meters, some of it is about the lower voltage system leading all the way to homes and businesses. And so we have initiatives like our smart grid demonstration in Irvine that's an $80 million project. About half of it is covered from stimulus funds at the federal level. But that's taking a look at a range of technologies from the high voltage grid all the way through to the low voltage and into the home area network, and cybersecurity applications. We have a bulk system side storage project up in Tehachapi. That's an area where we're building a $2 billion line to access 4,500 megawatts of wind and solar resources. Great place to pilot some storage technology. It's a 32 megawatt hour lithium ion system. And we're also looking at the control systems and architecture around that bulk grid. So this is about making the grid more efficient, being able to use it better and smarter. And I was talking with a couple of the folks before the session. It's an exciting time, but in a sense, we're catching up to other industries. We have a telecom business that's under my umbrella. Telecom technology, those of you who do communications engineering out there, you know that today telecom networks are self-monitoring, self-healing, and you're basically going to the OODA model that Alexis showed, because there's a technology to do that. We have not had that for the power system until now. And so now finally we have communications technology and computation technology converging with engineering of high voltage, high power systems to start making that a reality. But a lot of work yet to be done on the gamut of the actual technologies, the optimization and control systems, and then the application to the grid. And let's not forget, then there's another big job in terms of financing that, making sure that as we manage the rates of our customers, we figure out how to turn this large ship in a way that won't make your rates go up to a level that you can't handle. But again, the partnerships we have with the academic community, Manny Chandy is here from Caltech. We're working with him on some of the smart grid architecture that will allow us to bring that kind of algorithm into the grid. And so it's an area of huge emphasis for us over the next several years. Let me touch on one more technology before I wrap up, and that's electric vehicles. So we went through this before in California, and we had the first wave of electric vehicles. Today, actually, SCE, I think it still has the largest electric vehicle fleet in the country, about 300 vehicles. We've traveled something like 17 or 18 million electric miles. But let's face it, the first wave didn't quite take. Great idea. Some of the core technologies were not there yet. importantly storage among them. This feels real right now. And as we take a look at a number of consultant forecasts and manufacturer prognostications and the like, quite frankly, the uncertainty band in terms of how big this will be, wide enough you could drive several large electric trucks through it, right? But we know that this is coming, and by the year 2020 in our system, we could have in the middle case as many as 450,000 new electric vehicles, high case 1 million, low case 100,000 and some. Now, why is this important? It's not just about cool new vehicles. It is about greenhouse gas reduction because EVs promise to deliver those at a cost point that could be more attractive than some of the renewables technologies that we're also working on right now. But it's an interesting one because it will involve not only interactions with the grid and requiring some new smarter components for that two-way communication, but also policy level interactions because now you have the transportation and the electric sectors meeting together, and so when you think about policies like greenhouse gas reduction or cap and trade markets, if those are enabled in the country at some point, now you have these industries along with the oil industry that have to interact and cooperate to at the end of the day do the right thing for society to achieve sustainable actions and through greenhouse gas reduction. Let me close with one thought, and that is we do have a big juggling act here, and I like the idea of a 15th challenge. This might go along with your 15th, maybe it's the 16th, but when we look at our job, job one for us, it's the base at the bottom of this chart, it's safety. It's your safety, it's our employees' safety, and understand that we're stressing we're having to be more creative about that because we're taking, for example, the low voltage distribution grid, which was designed by engineers really starting 100 years ago, a lot of the bulk work done 50 years ago. It was designed as a one-way grid. You go from a transformer on the high side to serving a number of homes on the low side. We're changing the nature of that grid. That's a good thing. Right? But as we put on more distributed generation, or maybe in the future in Gen 2 or Gen 3 of electric vehicles, maybe some of those vehicles can interact better with the grid and take power or put power back in. We're making this a two-way grid. That has safety implications, and we need to make sure that when one of our folks is out there working on the grid, they know that there's no power flowing their way and putting them in harm's way. And it's also important to you as a customer. But beyond that base of safety, there's three balls that we juggle. It's reliability, because when you flip the switch, you expect the lights to come on. It's these environmental goals that are so core to public policy today, but it's also affordable rates. And there's a cost to all the things I just talked about. And managing those trade-offs will be one of the critical jobs that not just us, but really ultimately our partnership with regulators, policymakers, and U.S. customers will just be critical. One last plug. A lot of tough engineering challenges ahead. This is exciting. We think that the electric industry may change more in the next 10 years than it did in the last 100. It will require significant scientific and engineering talent. And so particularly for those of you who are students, keep at it. We need your help. And oh, by the way, we're hiring, so SCE.com. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. I guess you could call that a high voltage pitch. All right, so lots of specific questions about your nuclear device. And
I've got some brochures.
I'm sure you do. And but before that, I want to ask just kind of a big question here and have you all weigh in on it. Would the grand challenges, 14, 15, 16, whatever we finally come up with, would the grand challenges happen if it was just left the free market alone? Can business do this alone, or does it require something much more?
That's great. That's a very good question. I think what we're seeing was that there was a niche in the market. There was a need for this product. And so as a result, it was more of just a synergy of things, the technology, meeting with the financial need, and then getting private investors to step up. And I think that's what's new about some of the nuclear ventures we see now, is that they're being privately funded as opposed to being funded by the government. And that's a very different model than what's been done in the past.
What do you think, Peter?
I think some of them it would and some of them it wouldn't. Yeah. Certainly a great deal of the renewal of urban infrastructure, a great deal of stuff around availability of water and so forth. I could easily see that happening. Some kind of favourable policy conditions for that would help, but fundamentally my strong suspicion is that would happen anyway. The fusion kind of stuff, I rather doubt. The enhancement of virtual reality probably would. So, you know, there are, it's some and some. And that's the point I was trying to make. This is not a one-size-fits-all situation. And people really need to understand for each grand challenge exactly what the commercial situation is going to be, because it's going to be different for each of them.
Well, what's it going to take to fill that donut hole you talked about?
To fill the donut hole? Well, as I was saying, I mean, a large part of it was the session we had on communication this morning. Don't forget that, you know, the donut hole, the small, medium industries, you know, they are creatures of the society in which they're based, just as we are. And, you know, there'll be some people out there who get it and some people out there who don't get it. So from the point of view of attracting their interest, do not assume that the financial motive will overcome prejudice, unwillingness to believe and everything else, because it absolutely won't. But if you can demonstrate to people that there is a business opportunity in there, they might be willing to take a look. So to overcome that donut hole, it's about saying, okay, we're going after this grand challenge. These are the kind of things we're going to need. These are the kind of markets that are going to result. These are the kind of opportunities. Here are some materials. Here's some tax subsidy or whatever it might be to help you actually get involved in that market.
Alexis, what do you think? How much of it can be accomplished purely by the free market?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, how much of the grand challenges of the 14,
yes,
some of the role of government, some of the role of business, what would you say, how much of it could be accomplished purely by the free market? And we might as well bring up the house lights if you have some questions. We want to start getting those in the system here. Go ahead.
That question, I think, is a very important one for the following reason. It used to be that innovation, technology, and the creation of intellectual capital, which in a sense reflects directly on the great grand challenges, originally was primarily stimulated by the government. We went away from that era into a situation where I think the government expected the commercial sector to actually do a lot of that innovation, invention, broadband, whatever have you. I think that's a good thing, but at the same time what has happened is the lack of investment from the government's perspective into the STEM, the science, technology, education, preparing the students, the educational systems, the fundamentals of science has gone down.
So in your view, then, the government's role is to help. In your view, the government's role then is to sort of keep the pipeline filled.
Exactly.
Right?
Keep the pipeline filled, and the commercial sector will do the investments that make the products actually useful both for the government as well as for the commercial sector. So it's a balance between the two.
What do you think?
I think it's a combination. It's very clear. I mean, our country's gone through different cycles, and maybe right now we need a little more help particularly on infrastructure, tax policy. I mean, I'm in the high technology industry. It's very difficult to do anything in the United States, particularly California. A lot of the jobs that Silicon Valley used to build silicon, Silicon Valley doesn't build silicon really anymore. Tons of jobs have left. So I think it's a combination. We're going to have better policies, and I think the private sector will invest. So.
Yeah, I agree with everybody that it requires a combination, and let me give you a couple of reasons why, a couple of data points. Again, go back, at least within our sector, we're talking about very long-term investment decisions, and investment decisions that today may not appear economic based on current markets. So if you take, for example, a choice to have renewable energy, but we don't have a price for carbon in our economy yet, that renewable energy is a heck of a lot more expensive than my alternative to go off and look for gas-fired power, as an example. So what's the role of government there? One is what Alexis said in terms of keeping the pipeline full, R&D funding to bring those cost curves down, but also it's a role for regulation in saying, here's a long-term goal. It may not appear economic based on current metrics, so we're going to create a new metric through regulation. You can go too far with that, and you can wreck economies, and so the art here is in how do you get to the right trade-off points so you're balancing fostering enough innovation and, quite frankly, providing a sufficient level of subsidy, which is what you're doing inherently, without doing it to an extent that you end up wrecking the economy and taking jobs out of the U.S. into other countries.
Is it a correct statement to say that, can everybody hear me okay? I know it's hard up here. Is it a correct statement to say that business in general is not so much resistant of regulation? What it wants most is a level playing field, right? Or is that
stable
true
regulation?
Or false? What?
True, but also stable regulation. Because again, if you're making long-term bets, you can't make long-term bets in an environment where you think that the rules might change next year.
I guess that would be a hilly playing field then, right? Wouldn't it? Would you agree with that?
I think, I mean, there's regulation and regulation. It actually depends what it is. But as we were saying, the kind of regulation that encourages investment in things that are going to save greenhouse gases, that encourages investment in things that are going to save water, absolutely. Yeah. Some of the other regulations you might think of might be slightly more counterproductive.
In what cases does business need an outright handout to accomplish some of these goals?
Some of the ones that are incredibly capital intensive, where the risk balance is hard to deal with up front. I mean, I would have thought fusion is probably one of those. There are absolutely startups that are approaching, that are trying to think about aspects of nuclear fusion, and some of them have been venture backed, but it's a very, very unusual venture model. I think so some of those longer term, some of those more aggressive goals, those very, very capital intensive goals for which there is no immediate market, I suspect they will need life support for some considerable time. Some of the stuff that's nearer at hand, where there is a more immediate problem that somebody's willing to pay to have fixed, around some aspects of urban infrastructure already, around some aspects of water infrastructure already, around the smart grid already, less need for outright handout.
You want to add to that, Alexis? Go ahead.
Yes, I do. I think business is looking right now in terms of what is the quarterly product, what's the quarterly profit, what is the dividend that we're going to put out, what's the cash flow. Right. The focus is so much dependent on value for shareholders in immediacy that the investment becomes almost secondary. And that is of concern to me, because understanding the vision, understanding the strategy for the company, understanding where it's going is just as important.
Yes. Well, what occurs to me here is you have business on quarterly cycles, and you have politicians on 2- and 4-year cycles. Nobody's looking really over the hill anymore.
Well, it can happen.
In this room maybe, but yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, we got a 10-year grand challenge of our own in IBM. We're going to create a lithium-air battery with a lot of help from other companies, other universities, and so on and so on. But that is actually relatively unusual. I mean, I dare say you guys have, and I dare say Southern California Edison has too. But that's the other point I was making. The companies you've got here today are not typical of the vast general run of industry that the grand challenges have got to engage if they're actually going to get real traction in the economy. That's why I use the analogy of the donut hole.
They need those immediate gains. All right, question down here in the front.
Thank you very much. I'm a faculty here in Viterbi School. In our class, we studied 14 grand challenges, and some of my students here can correct me. By the way, very impressed by your presentation. Excellent, like the others. But I was a little disheartened when I didn't see nuclear fission as one of the grand challenges. Nuclear fusion is, but I think your presentation is beyond the 14 grand challenges. Am I right? Nuclear fission wasn't, thanks, okay. My question in light of Mr. O'Brien's talk is, Price-Anderson Act protected nuclear industry, and I think Mr. Pizarro's San Onofre is covered by that, and you enjoyed that. Right. We talk about government handouts to business or subsidy and that. What about the protection that Price-Anderson provided large nuclear plants like San Onofre? Would you enjoy protection by Price-Anderson, or it needs to be modified, or a new generation of Price-Anderson Acts should be enacted to support your technological development?
That's a really good issue. What we're looking at right now with these smaller modular plants is the question of, well, how much risk do they present now? Because we're looking at a much lower risk profile. So that question is being brought up right now. Right now, a plant would be built under the Price-Anderson Act and would be covered. But the question has been raised, okay, well, how much risk is involved, and how much emergency planning is required, and what would that look like? Is it going to be a modernized approach? Is it a more effective emergency planning, and what's that risk like? So we're just in the process of discussing that with the government to come up with, well, what strategy would be best to follow. But currently, these plants would be built under the Price-Anderson.
Could I add just a quick comment on that? Because I do think that Price-Anderson was an example, to your point earlier, around government thinking very long term, recognizing that in nuclear there was a large-scale, long-term investment with a risk that industry alone could not manage. And so the risk management required government support. I think there are other technologies that may be important, like carbon capture and sequestration, especially if you're talking about the long-term storage of carbon and geologic formations, where this is frankly one of the questions in the industry. Will you need a form of price Anderson to cover any, 20, 30, 40, 100, 200-year risk around it? So there are other examples out there.
Listening to your presentation, it made me think of the transition between mainframe computers and small desktops. They're distributed in some respects. Distributed nuclear power, which is kind of a scary thought in some respects. But anyway, it reminds me of the Ford Neutron there. But a couple quick questions from the tweets. How big are they? There was no.
So this is 65 feet tall.
65
That's
feet.
the containment, and our design really is a centralized station. So we're being very conservative and going very gradual with this. So basically, 12 units would be 540 megawatts, which is not really small.
And what would that? How many homes would that power? You know that, but I don't know.
So about 500,000 homes.
500,000 homes.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And what about the waste?
And so the waste, what we did was we're going with a conventional fuel for right now. And the reason for that is because there needs to be a waste policy in this country. Other countries seem to be able to grapple with it. Technically, it's understood. Whether we go to interim storage or to long-term disposal or reprocess, we need to make a decision. But we didn't want to change the fuel matrix at this point. So if we can go to a more advanced fuels or different technology, thorium, for example. But the thought was right now we need to stick with what is out there, so that when a decision is made, we can use our fuel and follow through that same process.
As a young reporter, I cut my teeth covering the Seabrook nuclear power plant, and so I remember that very well. Yeah. Obviously, people's perceptions of nuclear power have changed, and you have the irony of a lot of tree huggers now hugging nuclear because of climate change. Yeah. But is the world ready? Is this country ready, more in particular, ready to really embrace nuclear?
I believe so. I think what we're seeing is, and I showed one chart, that about 70% of Americans now are in favor of including nuclear as part of the energy mix. Not being totally reliant on that, but making it part of the energy mix. And, Green Tech Media did a survey last year, and they picked the top 10 high concepts for green technology. And they picked our technology as one of the top 10. And so that just shows that there's a perception now, in particular of small nuclear, as being much more green than we've seen in the past.
All right. Question down here in the front.
Thank you. I'm a faculty member here in the Viterbi School, and all of you had a message for students in your remarks. All of you asked for students' attention to various points.
Can you put the mic up just a little closer? Thank you.
Certainly. I think I have a healthy dissatisfaction with the quality of undergraduate engineering education nationally. And given the thoughts you've had about students, what in your mind is ideal preparation for someone joining your organizations? What characteristics would they have? Technical depth, business depth? Are there any specific elements that you think would be of particular importance?
Yeah, if I could.
Go, yeah, whoever wants to take that.
Okay. Let me just begin with when I first started at Oregon State University back in '87, there was a really strong emphasis on all the faculty members having a professional engineering license. They were expected to go out and apply their technology, apply their skills rather, to real technologies, and carry that to the classroom. And so there was a period of time where you were trying to bring that information to the classroom. So I think that's from the student side, thinking about that, making their education more applied, more hands-on. It used to be you work on a car, fix it, and I heard something earlier today about a carburetor. Well, I think that's a real important thing. Getting the students not just to do computer work, which is very important, but also some applied engineering and actually going out and seeing what their field will look like at the end. I thought that was a good comment earlier today.
Couple questions. Peter Williams. This is directed in a tweet to you. What is a tangible way to incorporate the grand challenges?
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you. What is it?
I'm sorry, yeah. What's it? I know it's hard up here, the acoustics are funny. What is a tangible way to incorporate the grand challenges into business? Can you give some examples of a tangible way to do that? And one that kind of goes alongside that, do you get the sense that industry is resting on its laurels and not pursuing big ideas in general? You said this, that the people here are kind of the exception.
Yeah, I mean, I think some tangible ways are around, especially with some of the nearer term grand challenges, for example, around infrastructure, for example, around water, for example, around virtual reality. What's the roadmap? What are you going to produce? What's its intended value? What's it going to be composed of? How's it going to relate to what exists now? Why is it better than what is out there today? Because oftentimes there is stuff out there today that, as I mentioned, sometimes appears to have been ignored. So why is it an improvement? What do you see the opportunities for it as being? You know, give us a clue, engage us in a dialogue. Think about this thing as a business proposition, not as a scientific endeavor, not as an engineering endeavor, but as a business. If it was your business and you were being asked to take that to market, what are the things that you would want to know? Because that's what we want to know. We have our own ideas, needless to say. And, you know, it's to the question you were answering just now, Jose, it fits. What do you want in engineers? You want engineers that can actually think about this thing as a business issue, first and foremost. Yeah, we employ people who are subject matter experts in their own right, but first and foremost, you want people who can think about this and say, you know what, if I produce this, or if I invent the other, or if I create such and such a thing, here's how it would get used in the business. And that's, you know, that is absolutely priceless. And so the tangible things about the grand challenges, especially for the nearer term ones where it's easier to do that, start thinking that through. Start setting this out as a business proposition. And then start, as we heard a wonderful presentation yesterday from the guy from the Los Angeles Economic Development Organization. Start working with trade associations, economic development associations, industry associations. Say, we've got this thing coming. We see the need for these kind of technologies. You know, in terms of supplying, we have this technology available that's going to produce the following benefits. We see these industry opportunities emerging. Help us shape them and frame them. So a much more active, proactive engagement process with the industrial framework, I think, is probably the...
And to that other question, and this goes to all the panel, do you have the sense that U.S. industry, in some respect, is coasting?
Some is, some isn't, as I said.
I mean, my personal opinion, no. I think U.S. industry is probably challenged more than they've been for many years. I think one of the challenges, particularly in technology, is that they've been unbelievably successful through this period, but we're not hiring at the rate we were because they're a little cautious of what the future is. And that in itself is a challenge. I mean, you look at IBM, you look at Oracle, you look at Qualcomm, you look at Google, you look at all these mammoths, they're spitting off more cash than they've ever spit off. We're all trying to find places to invest and create new businesses like crazy. And but that doesn't mean we're going to hire at this rate. And that concerns me a little bit, and I don't know how to solve that.
They're spitting off cash, huh? Can they hock a loogie my way? Is there any way?
Yeah. It's unbelievable what's coming out of these companies.
All right, front row, please.
Hi. This question is with regard to renewable energy technologies. We know that most of the technologies that exist today are inefficient to a certain degree. So from a business point of view, if I were to invest in any one of these technologies, I would be apprehensive because I know that in the next 1 or 2 years there's going to be something coming out that's more efficient. How do you see this changing in the next 5 or 10 years?
I can start with that. That is something that we worry a lot about, and again, this goes back to the idea of trade-offs. Do you wait until it's fully baked, or do you start layering in current technology and, you know, just successive layers of successive generations, which ultimately is what, as a society, we need to do, right? Because you can't walk your way up the S curve, the development curve, unless you go through Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3. I guess I give you a couple other answers to your question. One is, can't stress enough the importance of government support for basic R&D in places like this, right? Because we really need a lot of emphasis in the lab, and as important as the venture capital community has been and continues to be, as much as there's financial flows going into the renewable sector, in general, you're seeing folks investing in the next generation of the same technology, not in the radical new generation. And I think we need emphasis from the government side for that kind of R&D funding. And then the other piece is just making sure there that we're having real thoughtful consideration of how much to layer in of any current technology. So California, 20% renewables, that's great. It's clearly a stake in the ground. Like I said earlier, very expensive. One of the things that we've advocated as you think about going to 33%, make sure you do it in a way that minimizes costs, opening up access to as broad a set of markets as possible to manage those cost trade-offs efficiently. The more you restrict the solution space, the more you say, I want this technology today, as opposed to any broader set of technologies, the more you're going to raise costs and then get into the problem you're talking about.
Peter wants to add to that.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, technology capability in many cases it's deflationary, right? In the sense that the cost of computing power is going down, the cost per watt of solar power is going down, the cost per watt of wind power is going down, and so on and so on. And you get the equivalent situation in many other technologies. So you're an entrepreneur, you want to invest in that. Well, one, understand what the curve's likely to be. Two, pick a technology that when it comes to market, you're going to be sufficiently far up the curve to still be making money. I mean, that's as it ever was. You invest in information technology, for example, you've got that equation very much in mind.
All right, quick, I want to get, it's actually a question for both of you. Wouldn't pushing for expansion of wireless tech, actually both of you, it's been a long day, wouldn't pushing for expansion of wireless technology amplify the problem of cybersecurity? You want to start and then go, either way, whoever wants to go first.
I mean, there's no doubt security is a very important thing across fixed lines, wire lines. I would say, I mean, the problem exists regardless of how many lines there are going across. And
doesn't make it any worse?
I mean, there's going to be, I mean, there's bad guys out there regardless, and there's going to be more bad guys. We just have to be smarter in stopping them. But there is technology happening where you're doing security on the chip level. Everybody's thinking in security. Everybody's after the bad guys, and the battle is going to go on, but I don't see it getting any worse.
There'll always be Macs out there. And Macs, by the way, a lot of people think Macs should be hired by the likes of you guys. You might want to call this guy up. What do you think, Alexis?
There are two types of cybersecurity issues. One has to do with the fundamental nature of the Internet, which is all the connectivity that we have. The Internet was built as a trusted network. And when you put players in the game that are not trusted, then the fundamental architecture of the system is flawed. So that's the one thing that's not affected by wireless. The second part is not the fiber, but it's the radio frequency transmission. By increasing the wireless, I think you're more susceptible to jam more people or to cause disturbances to people. You're more susceptible in terms of disrupting operations within an airport, let's say GPS and so on and so forth. So I think there is some increase, it's not a substantial one, but there is the possibility for increased disruption using wireless by jamming or by essentially putting things into the ether or into the network that could affect potentially the connectivity.
Question in the back.
Yes. In the past 2 days, we've heard a lot about Sputnik, and we've talked about the fear that Sputnik created and that induced an era of innovation. And I think that the fear part is an entirely wrong way to look at this. And I want to look at two other ways that we can learn from what Sputnik has taught us. And the first is that we were given a challenge, and that was that we were going to put on a person on the moon in 10 years. And the second is that there was this inherent sense of competition. And I think both of these are two very, at least American ideas. And so what I want to know is, what are businesses doing to A, set a timeline for when new technologies will be produced, and how are they setting the competition among your competitors?
Who wants to take it?
I mean, it's a standard business planning process in terms of product planning. What technologies are you planning to have in the market by when, relative to what your competitors are going to be doing, what the market's going to be able to support. It's standard product planning, standard strategic planning in any business, I would have thought.
Anybody else want to take that?
Just say in terms of a challenge like a Sputnik or like a landing on the moon, I do think going back to the whole issue of climate change and greenhouse gas reduction technologies, that does feel like that is that kind of challenge for this generation. And the number of technologies that will need to be developed, the capital intensity that will need to be deployed towards that, just huge. And so I do think that that's where the public-private partnership, the role of government in setting some targets towards a price for carbon, the role of industry in thinking about these 1,000 flowers that will need to bloom to get there. And maybe that's a difference, right? Because when you're looking at going to the moon, the competition may have been between countries, but you were pursuing a single class of technology. Now we know this problem is large enough, we're going to need multiple technologies to address it. And that's a much broader, in some sense more exciting, but frankly much more difficult challenge.
Let's, speaking of competition here, we just have a few minutes left, but I'm curious to get your assessment, all of you, if you would. Can you hear me okay? On what you think, where are the areas the U.S. remains way ahead and preeminent? Where is it neck and neck, and where is it about to have its lunch eaten? You want to start?
Yeah, I think certainly just looking at the energy field and in particular nuclear, the U.S. has fallen behind compared to other countries. So, for example,
talking about France?
Like France, for example, 80% nuclear, and Japan similar. So this whole, in terms of competition, what we're seeing is we came out with this concept for modular scalable, and you see other companies now saying, hey, it's a good idea, and now entering that field, which validates our thinking. But I think that's one area that we're trying to recover from that, and we're building a new technology to do that.
I think, if I may, the question kind of miscasts the nature of innovation, at least in IBM. I mean, IBM's an American company. The fact that some of our innovation goes on in Haifa in Israel, or goes on in Beijing, or goes on in Brazil, or goes on in Tokyo, which it does, is kind of just par for the course for a multinational. We're an American company. We caused it to happen. I mean, do you define that as this country falling behind, or do you define it as this country getting smart and tapping into something that's going on in other countries? We define it as tapping into something that's going on in other countries.
Let's see, I recall the National Academy study of 2005 on the gathering storm, in which the Augustine study actually pointed out some of the shortcomings of the system and some of the shortcomings in terms of how we are truly falling behind on the basis of sheer numbers. There was another follow-up to that study that was issued about a month ago that actually shows that the situation is getting a little worse. So I think across the board we are falling behind. I think mostly in the manufacturing area. I believe the area that we still have a chance in terms of maintaining some level of preeminence is in our ability to create intellectual capital, because that's what we're really good at. But in terms of the actual tail end of the manufacturing and the services, I think we might as well kiss it off.
And where you sit in aerospace is a place where we still are, the U.S. is a preeminent player, right?
For the time being.
Who's it going to be?
Well, I don't know. I think there is a lot of interest from other parts in Europe and in Asia, that there is a substantial expenditure in terms of coming up to a peer level.
Isaac?
I mean, in our space, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I'd ask that question, what do you think, Europe, Asia, or U.S.? I mean, we're definitely on the forefront today in around mobile operating systems, a lot of the chip and intellectual property. In our area, it's just actually pretty amazing what's happened over the last really 5 years, and you really could point it to the iPhone. On that, the things that I'm happy about are that innovation and intellectual capital and the creativity of Americans. I think what I get concerned about is education. I get concerned about the money, the lack of money we're putting into education. And then manufacturing, we're not really thinking we could build things anymore. We just go to, and we're the worst of that, because our company, we're a fabless company. We're really around intellectual property. We're really around ideas. And then we have people around the world manufacture them. But it is a little scary, because when they start manufacturing them, they're going to get good at it, and they're going to be developing their own intellectual property. So that's scary.
Pedro?
First, in our industry, I agree with the point about nuclear. Right now we're having our steam generators replaced for San Onofre, our nuclear plant, and they're manufactured in Japan because there's no American manufacturer. In renewables, I think we are among the leaders worldwide in terms of renewable deployment and integration, but Germany's there, Spain is there, so there are others too. Smart grid, I think there's a lot of innovation that's coming out of the United States. Maybe outside of our industry, the broad theme kind of links to what Alexis was saying. I think at the university level, at the graduate level, when you think about the research labs, I still think we have a good, strong position worldwide there. I worry about the feeder pool going all the way down into the grade schools, and particularly in an environment with a tough economy and tough budgets at the federal and importantly budgets at the state level. We really need to redouble our efforts on how we continue to feed that pool, because folks, you know, for those of you who are faculty here, we're talking about the investment we're making in the students who are going to show up in your labs 15 years from now.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Stand up, give them a round of applause. Get ready for your picture. That's Jose Reyes, Peter Williams, Alexis Livanos, Isaac Babbs, and Pedro Pizarro. We appreciate your time. Good panel, good way to end it. Very nice picture there, very nice. And now to close this exciting day of presentations and discussions, one of the summit's organizing partners, Chair of the Division of Engineering and Applied Sciences at Caltech, Dr. Reyes Rosakis.
Thank you, Miles. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the opportunity to provide the closing remarks to what has been a remarkable gathering of minds committed to profound and game-changing approaches to solving hard technical, political, educational, and societal problems in a vast scale. By now, we have heard all the gory details, and we have seen all the frightening data, and I'm here to provide closure in a summary and a bit of my personal twist as well. So the series of grand challenges which the National Academy of Engineering has identified constitute a true Sputnik moment, as we heard Caltech President Jean-Louis Chameau say when he opened the technology panel yesterday. We in this room perfectly, clearly realize that indeed we have a critical Sputnik moment at hand. The question is, does your neighbor realize this? Does your dentist? Does your congressperson? Does your own child? This particular Sputnik moment is more complex than what we were facing back in 1957, since we are simultaneously trying to tackle very diverse challenges, challenges that are not only facing the US, but are also very international. As we have heard over the past few days, if we fail to address these challenges, the results could prove catastrophic in both the short and the long term. Global climate change, energy, the environment, natural disasters, terrorism, cybersecurity, healthcare. This list is long and this list is very daunting. In the short term, failing to address these challenges as a nation means degraded global competitiveness and a weakened economy. In the long term, failing to address these challenges means eventually facing successive crises of global proportions. I'm going to try and pose several questions, actually pose and repose several questions and challenges this afternoon, with the hope that you will be helping me answer and address them in your own ways in the years to come. Really, we do not have more than a few years. I would say we don't have the luxury of decades. I count myself as extremely fortunate to be able to tell you that every day I drive to work and I'm in the inspired company of game changers. The Caltech community is full of them, and we're working in some measure on each and every of the grand challenges that have been identified by the NAE. I work in a vibrant and intellectually charged atmosphere at Caltech, a residential campus nestled in Pasadena, and I know that this atmosphere also exists in various permutations in all the engineering schools across the country. Let me tell you about these schools. These are places where problem solving, persistence, ingenuity, and creativity are developed, they are nurtured, and most especially They are valued. Places where the deep personal satisfaction one feels from discovering, from understanding, from building, fixing, mitigating, improving and creating is developed, nurtured, and again valued. The emphasis is on the word valued. Please keep this in mind. My job, and I argue all of our jobs, is to first extend the excitement of this atmosphere that exists in engineering campuses out beyond the confines of our sheltered meccas. But even more importantly, our job is to shift the perception of society towards valuing the engineering profession, and engineers in particular, in renewed, concrete, and again, let me emphasize, very material ways. A society without engineers is an impotent society. Will the United States be learning this the hard way? Is a descent into mediocrity inevitable? Where have all the rocket scientists gone? It is true that the best engineers and the best scientists have never been locked in their labs. And one can name names and easily come up with an engineering rockstar hall of fame. Unfortunately, the broader society seems to be no longer enamored of the kind of a rockstar we produce. And the few engineers who are considered successful, who become household names, are not known for the technical achievements so much as they are known for the business acumen and great wealth. So how do we galvanize the broader society? How do we create the conditions in the United States that elevate or re-elevate engineering in a way that the dismal statistics we are facing reverse course? We engineers know that we are rock stars, but does the Disney Channel know also? Now, my own particular obsession with these themes revolves around what happens with teenagers at the time when the hormone starts flowing. I have noticed that boys and girls in grammar school and middle school delve into science and math like they do in all other subjects. There may be hesitation here or there, but the excitement about learning extends broadly and extends very deeply. Let me tell you that I believe that it is easy to excite and inspire the pre-adolescent mind, but probably it stops right there. However, the moment the young men and women begin to notice each other and need to appear successful and begin thinking about what a successful life is composed of, the capacity to earn lots of money seems to dwarf all other measures of societal success. We as educators, engineers, policymakers, and business leaders need to first radically inspire and then effectively incentivize those who I refer to as the bright and the undecided. So let me repeat, inspire first and then incentivize. Two different things. In this conference we concentrated mainly on the first one, the inspiration. And our audience is, among other things, the bright and the undecided. These are not the very small percentage of kids who are essentially born to be society's problem solvers. These are not the kids who absolutely adore conic sections and later calculus. These are the kids who are capable of taking on one of many diverse paths, to Wall Street, to courtrooms, to arbitration hearings, to hospitals, to surgery theaters, to city halls, and to state capitals. These are what I call the really bright and undecided. They are the pool of talent that we have to draw from to increase the numbers of graduating engineers from 4.5% of the degreed population to 10, to 15, to 20%, as we see in Asia. Some of the questions that these kids are rightly asking themselves are the following. What are the rewards of choosing arduous coursework in high schools and colleges while my friends are partying or sleeping? What are the rewards of choosing a challenging career without the quick six-figure salary? Will anyone be interested in hearing about my quest for a more optimal algorithm at the party on Saturday night? Will I be even invited to the party on Saturday night? So engineering for engineering's sake is a fine idea, and some will always answer that call. And some will even write poetry because they must, or teach because that is what they were born to do. But for the vast majority of the bright and the undecided, we as a society have to be able and willing to offer more. We have to offer more at every juncture where choices are being made. More engineering scholarships, more mentoring, more opportunities for material success, more opportunities for not just 15 minutes of fame, but for real glory in the pantheon of individuals who grace the covers of magazines for their engineering achievements, not only for their material ones. More input into the decision made by policymakers, and more input into the political process itself. So, more. Caltech engineers are ending up working for hedge funds. Should we be proud? Should we be alarmed? What is being gained? What has been lost? Now, my personal opinion is that we are squandering our intellectual resources. We have an internal brain drain. Intellects are being underutilized. And where they could have been utilized, there has opened up a chasm. Are we as a society prepared to invest, truly invest, to heal this chasm? I think about young mechanical engineers turned hedge fund operatives. Will they be asking themselves after the allure of money fades, what am I contributing? Am I personally satisfied by the challenges I undertake every day? And what are the problems that I'm solving in society? Can I ever return to engineering after 1 year, after 5 years, after 10 years? Of course, the problem is not as easy as I'm trying to make it. And I must, in all honesty, rightly ponder, will the resources that he or she amasses ultimately be used to fund a startup company that manufactures the component of a robust large-scale solution to energy storage, for example? Well, as I promised, I have given you a few questions that need to be addressed and attacked from all quarters. The NAE has found a very good way to explain to the public and to ourselves how exciting our profession is, to identify grand challenges, to help solve them, and to tell the world. We need to tell the world how great engineers have been and how great engineers are. Grand challenges capture the imagination, they propel the effort, and inspire communities. Maybe someday high school kids at a party can talk about the grand challenges without being embarrassed. And maybe even the Disney Channel will profile engineering rock stars. Engineers are the ones who will meet these grand challenges head-on, again finding their valued place in society. I can only hope that there will be enough of them around. This is perhaps the greatest of the nation's grand challenges. I would like to end by thanking my good friend Yanis Yorchos, our fearless leader, for hosting this remarkable event, and all of our organizing partners, Rick Miller from Ole and Tom Kachules from Duke. I would also like to acknowledge the profound and sustained contributions to education and to engineering of our summit keynote speakers, Max Nikias and Chuck Vest. Also, we are very grateful to our panel keynote speakers, Jean-Louis Chameau, John Martin, Linda Katehi, Henry Jenkins, Maria Clave, and Jose Reyes for opening the discussion with great insight and enthusiasm. And of course, our moderator, the wonderful Miles O'Brien, or as he now calls himself, Milos Obrianopoulos, for his great humor and truly Greek passion. Finally, thank you to all for participating in this wonderful event in the past days. Our work is only beginning. Before I leave the podium, I would like to say that I've just spoken to our august leader, Yannis Yorchos, who informed me that this event will not be the last, and we're going to follow up with something much grander in an international scale. So the grand challenges are going to go international in the Davos style. So you will hear more details about this from him very soon, I'm sure. Thank you.
Harris, you need to stay here. We need the rest of the, thank you, by the way. Thank you for the kind words. The rest of the Greek mafia needs to come up here, and that guy Miller, too. Miller Reyes, or I don't know what it is. All right, so, and while they're coming up, I want to give you a quick little housekeeping note. We're taking full advantage of technology. If there's something you want to hear again, think about, replay over and over again, it'll be, this entire conference will be played streaming at www.gcs2010.org webcast. And then on Monday, go to YouTube, to the USC Viterbi YouTube page, YouTube channel, and you will find the constituent parts. All these individual panels will be there. They'll be there forever, so link them, tweet them, tell the world about them, listen to them one more time, and see if there's some ideas. Most important, think of ways you can take action to implement some of these great ideas that we talked about here. Gentlemen.
Okay, well, on behalf of my colleagues here, I am going to give another 45-minute speech. I'll spare you from that. It was a great pleasure to host this event. It took quite a bit of an effort to put it together, and it would not have been put together without the help of my colleagues here and the inspiration and support. And, but I am very pleased with the outcome of this event, the quality of the conversation, the ideas that were discussed, lots of action items that we took home for consideration. And I cannot refrain by saying that we came here to solve 14 grand challenges, but we ended up adding a few more for consideration. On behalf of everyone, I'd like to thank you for coming, and I'd like to also give the podium to Tom and Rick to say a few words as well. Thank you so much.
Well, this is a surprise. It's been a wonderful day and a half, and I echo my colleagues' sentiment. This has been inspiring. I think you can look forward to rolling up your sleeves and really getting to work on these grand challenges over the next year and a half, and an international summit, a jam session, if you will. I'm going in about a week to Singapore for the Global Colloquium on Engineering Education, and the whole theme of that is the grand challenges. So there's tremendous interest in the global community in digging into these grand challenges, as well as the interest here in the U.S. So the movement will certainly continue. With your help, I'd like to ask you to be essentially deputies or ambassadors of the Grand Challenge movement. Spread the word to your colleagues, to your little brothers and sisters, about that this is what engineering is about. It's about helping people. It's about sustainability, health, security, and joy of living. And that's why we're proud of being engineers. Thank you, and have a wonderful trip back.
there's not much that I can add. I'd just like to thank my colleagues for teaching me what affirmative action really means. As the only one here who's not Greek. I really do believe that the power of the grand challenges has just begun to take effect in the youth today. And if we use this right, we can change the conversation beyond engineering. In my own view, the definition of an engineer is somewhat different from what you see in the ABET manuals. An engineer is someone who envisions what has never been and does whatever it takes to make it happen. And I think working together we can do that with these grand challenges. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much. Hopefully USC can engineer a victory over the Cardinal. Good luck to you all. Have a great weekend.